Welcome back to Ask the Educator, a podcast for all professionals involved in medical device processing and sponsored by Healthmark Industries. The education team here at Healthmark has 280 years of combined experience in areas ranging from sterile processing, endoscopy, OR, biomed, to hospital and industry leadership. Our goal is to leverage our collective experience to answer one of your questions each episode, giving you the practical tips you need to succeed in the evolving world of device processing. My name is Kevin Anderson, clinical educator here at Healthmark, and I will be your host. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Ask the Educator. Today on this episode, I have with me Cheron Rojo. Cheron, welcome back. It's always good to have you.
Thank you, Kevin.
So, Cheron, in this series we have going on, it's called the Survey Readiness series. We're touching on a bunch of things we believe that a Joint Commission surveyor or D&V surveyor might come in and really hit on in these different departments and sterile processing across the country, some of the common stuff so that we can help our listeners prepare. And in this episode, I was thinking about all things related to logs and documentation. I know from personal experience that one of the favorite things to do for any surveyor is to take a look at your logs and,
oh yes,
just like OR or any other place I've worked in healthcare, we have so many needs for logs and tracking and documentation and all of this stuff. So, Cheron, if you would just kind of maybe share some examples of the various logs that we might be talking about that we need to be cognizant of for a surveyor.
I think the most common, obviously, are sterilization records. I think they know where to go or who to ask, and they go right for it. But I think the other ones that you may not realize that they definitely are hot topics for them is immediate use logs and also cleaning verification logs. They're very much familiar with those now, and they will ask for those logs. And if you have a manual system on paper, they definitely they're going to go through page by page. So making sure that, and we had talked about this before, making sure you don't have 6 months prior in your logbook. You want to limit like the month before and then have the current month, because then they're going to look, right? And if they find maybe a hole in that, they're going to keep going back.
That's right.
So make sure it's just a month before and then the current month. But those two records, I think, are one of the biggest ones besides the eyewash station. They'll look at that. They'll look at temp logs. They'll just walk around and look at logs.
Yeah, that's a great start. I really like that you brought up the IUSS log. It was funny that you mentioned that, because one thing that is interesting in particular, in my opinion, about IUSS logs is that there's still this different process that exists in all the departments, where in some of them, sterile processing owns the entire IUSS log and record, all of that. And then there's some where it's split, where sterile processing does the tests, and then the OR runs the actual machine and documents the rest. So I think a lot of us are going to be left a little vulnerable when we have both departments kind of with their hands in the log and documentation and such. So that is something I think is really important for people to be aware of. And what's it like in your facility? Make sure that all of those components are spoken for. One I had just asked at a facility I was at was, does your OR staff know if and when they need a BI test on a flashed item or IUSS item? So those are common things to think about when it comes to IUSS. But you also mentioned eyewash stations. That's another good one, because this could be one that either SPD documents and logs, or maybe even facilities. And sometimes there's a log that's placed right on the eyewash station, right? And then sometimes those things are totally empty because you have a log somewhere else, and you're leaving yourself vulnerable to a surveyor citing you for that. So what else have you seen? What other types of logs should we be looking out for?
Those are probably the main ones. Again, what they're going to do is walk around and look at any type of log. They're going to look at any type of manual logs that are just laying around in folders on a wall in a little tiny holder. They're just going to walk around and look at all that. Now, they may ask, based on their experience, what kind of things are you tracking? They may also look at your installation tracking records. If you're tracking that you're checking the installation, they could be looking at visual inspection. I mean, it just depends on where they go. Okay. So again, every department's different. Every surveyor is different. They just kind of go and they walk around and kind of like, oh, you have a bore scope. Oh, how do you document that? So again, it's going to be based on so basically what you need to do is walk around and really listen to your gut. If your gut tells you, I don't know if they're going to find this, then change it. Trust me. Those are the ones with your gut is telling you something right. I had a gut feeling with our OR logs with immediate use, and it was one of my facilities I worked at. It was mutual. Now, my gut told me, that's kind of going to be pretty, and I knew that for many years that eventually something would happen. Didn't listen to my gut, and guess what the survey did? They said, "Where is this? Where is this? Oh, so OR does this piece," and there was a hole missing on the OR side, and then there we go. We got cited for that. Afterwards, we ended up learning a big lesson. Listen to your gut is one. And if you have an instrument tracking system, convert your logs as best you can into the tracking system. So we took the immediate use, put it into our instrument tracking system. SPD took it over completely to where they called us to do the immediate use and testing and everything. Done. That also happened with the eyewash station. There was a manual log. We checked it weekly on a Monday. Monday was a holiday for that month and then Joint Commission came the next month. And guess what? It wasn't checked. We ended up taking that. They found it. We checked every other Monday except that one Monday that was a holiday. I think it was Memorial Day or something. Or something like that. Then we took it, went to instrument tracking system. And then we actually made mandatory fields, which is something else to think about, because when you have holes in your instrument tracking system or in your logs, make sure that you're talking with your instrument manufacturer of your tracking system to make sure they can make mandatory fields, because it won't let a technician advance to the next stop until they complete the lot number, the expiration, or whatever it may be. So that's probably my biggest word of advice is, making those mandatory fields in your system.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a great recommendation, Cheron. I think for anybody who has the fortune of having an instrument tracking system, finding those other ways to leverage that technology that you have is a great way to use an asset that already exists in your department. And that is one major opportunity. If you're doing any paper logs and you have instrument tracking and you can move them over and create mandatory fields and all of this, you have a much better chance at having complete documentation and having compliance with that documentation and being able to find it, right? And then you don't have to keep your paper logs even clean, because some of them are on the decontam side, right? And that kind of thing. So a lot of great ideas there. But for those people who may not have instrument tracking, or maybe there's certain logs that no matter how they work with their instrument tracking, they don't seem to get a log perfectly the way they want it to, so they keep it on paper. Do you have any recommendations for those folks who may not be able to convert over to that electronic version?
Making sure that you have some type of perpetual checking system, checks and balances. So whether all the records are collected after the end of each shift by a lead or a QA lead, and those are all checked during that shift, or it's daily or whatever it may be. I wouldn't go any further than that. I think by shift is probably one of the best ways from just my experience, because you let it go any longer, then it's harder to correct the problem, or the person's already gone home, they're on vacation for 2 weeks, now the record can't be fixed. So I think the quicker it's found and you're able to deal with it, I think that's a lot better. I used to be a QA lead of some sorts doing that, and I had to do it by day. And so it was a lot. It was a lot of work. You almost have to justify an FTE. And I've been in facilities where they've done that. They justified for an FTE because it took full time, if not more than full time, to check all of these records in a combination of manual and tracking, or if you're just manual. again, it's a lot of work to be able to look at everything, making sure everything matches up, and then deal with it. Meaning that you're having the person correct it, because you can't do that, right? It's got to be the person, hey, was it a pass? Oh yeah, I forgot to put that. But also tracking trends in that. Tracking trends for that, it's not just about holding someone accountable. That's just one piece of it. But also looking at trends of, wait a minute, everybody's making the same mistake. Why? And then to turn out, oh, it's the location of the computer. Or maybe we need another computer. Or maybe we need another clipboard for the manual system. Or maybe the testing is not correct because the expiration date is on the left and the other one we used to was on the right. So no one was trained to know where the expiration date was on the new product. There were so many things I found in the trending, and I think that's very beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Cheron, that you bring up. I think operationalizing some sort of audit process for your logs and documentation is just a great practice to get into. That even though it might be a lot of work per se, I think it's a lot less work if you do it every day and you're not having to look back as far, right? If you're doing it weekly or monthly, now you have even more burden on your plate at once to go back as far as a week or a month to try and look at every single blank and try and, correct any mistakes or anything like that. And you're getting further away from the limitations of people's memory and all of that. So I think there's a lot of really great advice in there. And I think another opportunity for just general blanks that I see in logs and documentation is the lack of simple like check boxes, even or a circling of an NA, a non-applicable type field, those mandatory fields, not applicable fields, check boxes, using simple tools to make logging real easy. And so I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of solutions out there that people could try and implement in their facility to make sure that these are considered kind of low-hanging fruit, I think, for surveyors. Right. And it just seems inevitable.
And also actions too, Kevin. Yeah. It's not just about the boxes and maybe not applicable, but also what's the action or after that. Meaning if the cleaning verification didn't pass, then they want to see if there's an empty box there, someone might put NA. And I've seen it before. And it's like, no, that's not NA. What did you do? Did you call someone? Did you run another load or run another test? The machine was down. They're going to look at that and they're going to say, well, no, this is not NA or this shouldn't be blank. What happened? Because I noticed there's other fails, but no one's doing anything about it. So another thing to think about.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one thing that comes to my mind when you mention things out of range and what did you do corrective action wise is like temperature and humidity logs and things like that. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know if that'll end up being a thing of the past just because of how they've sort of changed the standards or whatever, if you will. But I know that historically, temperature and humidity was one that they were always looking at. And what did you do when it went out of limitations? Because inevitably, especially if you're, in a location like myself with all 4 seasons, I know Cheron in Las Vegas, maybe you don't have to deal with this, but with 4 seasons,
one season is gambling season. One season, that's all it is here.
Here the seasons wreak havoc on our temp and humidity and HVAC system. So just some really great advice, Cheron. I really appreciate it. So do you have any maybe other stories or other things that you'd like to share?
Of course, I have many.
Yeah. Well, let's hear some good ones.
Well, let's go from the temp and log. So just understand that if you do not document that and it's another department's responsibility, you still need to know the answer. Right. Okay. Yep. So if they ask you and say, well, do you document the temperature humidity? And you saying no, then the next question is going to be, well, who does? And if you don't know, trust me, it's going to go down this horrible rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. So just understand you still need to know where, one, to find it or who does it. I've been in a situation where I've done just a consultation like you have done recently. Yeah. And I asked I think it was just an eyewash station, I believe. It was something really simple. And I literally got 3 answers from just a group of technicians. No one knew who did it. And no one recognized the initials either. So having something legible is another key piece in documentation if you are doing it manual. I remember searching, coming in, looking at our IUSS when it was manual, and
Sure.
that's the gentleman that actually caught us with this situation. And when they did, they couldn't read they could make it out, but it wasn't really okay. Yeah, it's a DeBakey forceps.
It was chicken scratch, basically, is what you're saying.
And he could make that out, but also the detail.
Yeah.
What was it? An 8-inch? Was it a thoracic? What is it? And that makes sense because he also, after that question, guess what he asked? Where are your trend reports? Are you doing that? And luckily we were. And looking at, well, you can't really look at a trend and know that you need more 8-inch DeBakey thoracic forceps if you're just saying a DeBakey forceps, because they come in 6, they come in 11-inch. So just also looking at trend reports and having those are going to help you in so many ways, because you don't want the overall message out of this is about, yes, you need to do documentation, but you don't want people to be scared of it. You don't want people to be negative towards it. I think education is definitely essential here. And a lot of times it's not just the people. Sometimes it's just the process, the flow, the tools that they have. Just a simple pen that wasn't attached to the clipboard. And so no one did it because the pen wasn't there. I mean, it's as simple as that. So,
gosh, it's so true. Oh man, Cheron, I it's crazy to think that our time has already sort of passed on this one. I think that there's so many stories and so many thoughts and ideas that can come from this. But I think we hit on a lot of it. I can just tell you, like you said, I've done a few audits recently, and in most cases, I'm seeing empty spaces in logs. And so I just want to recommend, no matter what your process is, whether it's electronic or paper, that you have one where you're constantly looking at these things and making sure there's no blanks. And then when, like you said, if something's out of range, there's some sort of actions to be taken and it's documented. Right. So just want to thank you so much for helping me with this one. I think getting people ready for surveys again is just going to be a great service that we can provide.
Right. Correct. Thank you, Kevin.
That wraps up our second installment of our Survey Readiness series. Cheron Rojo and I discussed the importance of checking your logs or documentation. Any record or log that you keep, whether digital or on paper, is low-hanging fruit for a surveyor. They will check these, I guarantee it. So here are 5 simple tips to help you with your logs and documentation. Number 1, surveyors will look for blanks in your data. If you have a daily log and it wasn't documented on during a weekend or a holiday, they are going to notice. So check your logs for completeness. Number 2, what are some common logs that they may look at? The IUSS record, the eyewash station log, temp and humidity logs, and any quality tests that you do, like cleaning verification tests on your washers. Number 3, consider adding a step in your process to check your records or logs for completeness every day or perhaps every shift, depending on how often you're documenting in these things. You want to identify gaps in your records before it's too late to correct it. Number 4, make sure you have a process in place for any documentation of items that are found to be out of range. What is the expected action and how is that documented? And number 5, if you are using a handwritten log, make sure what you're documenting is legible. We got to be able to understand what you're documenting, how to read it. I hope you found these 5 simple pointers regarding your logs and documentation helpful for preparing for your next survey. If you have any questions about survey readiness or anything else, please send them to our email address at asktheeducator@hmark.com. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. All opinions expressed on this show are those of the presenters. Before using any medical device, it is important to review the device manufacturer's instructions for use.